Hey, y'all. Before we start, I want you to know that I was able to get brand new, shiny, new audio equipment, but it may sound a little bit different. You may hear some background noise, like my cute and cuddly dog snoring in the background, but I'd love to hear what you think about it. In any case, I hope it's better.
You are listening to Preston's Poetry Podcast.
Today, I want to introduce a poetic form that is really old, but also very new. It's called the Villanelle. Now, what makes it both old and new? The villanelle is, in one sense, a very old form, a form that first moved from Latin to Italian and then into French. A quick wiki search first spots it in French in 1606. But the old examples of villanelles were just variations on ballad forms, which came out of the medieval French troubadour tradition, which hopefully I'll get to at some point in a later episode. But in any case, a wave of modernist poets in English revived the villanelle. So it got this new resurgence at the beginning of the 20th century. What is a villanelle? Well, technically, it starts with a tercet, 3 lines. Those lines will recur throughout the poem as it's followed by 4 more tercets. In order to stick the landing, the volta, the turn is a quatrain. That's 4 lines in which the repeating lines reappear. Of course, there are variations on this, but that's the general framework. And I know it's complex, but it starts with 3 lines. There come more 3 line groups, and you'll hear some repeats. The end is 4 lines and uses all those repeated lines. Now, if it sounds complex, well, it's because it kind of is. Early modernists hated it, finding it too formal and restrictive. Like Whitman and others, these kinds of measured formulas were too complicated for most modernists. Sonnets went by the wayside too. Poets felt that the old metered forms, the strict structures of lines and stanzas and rhymes, it was all too many rules. In their eyes, formal poetry, as it's now called, has this destructive and lame tendency to be about the form first and the content second. Some examples of this are poems I've covered already, like the Coleridge poem or Stevenson's Land of Nod, but you can throw Tennyson in there too. I think it's also important to note, though, not everybody shared that view. Robert Frost famously said, "Writing poetry without form is like playing tennis without a net." And so from the 1930s, some modernists called new formalists, a term that applies to all sorts of movements since Whitman, tried to bring back form and do it well. I think it's also important to say that it wasn't just new formalists either. Marginalized poets, which includes female and black poets, they also used formal and metered poetry as a way to fight back against tradition. I'm thinking about the Harlem Renaissance poets like Gwendolyn Brooks, Robert Hayden, Claude McKay, but also others like Emily Dickinson, who I wouldn't necessarily say was fighting back, but others like Elizabeth Bishop, Edna St. Vincent Millay, and many, many, many more. To really ignore metered or formal poetry is to also ignore the fact that many poets engage those stuffy forms in order to reform them, to forge a place for them and for other poets like them. And even if form was related to a tradition we've been fighting for some 150 years now, it's not even necessarily true that poems follow a form in order to follow the form. The newer formalists didn't ditch form. They wanted to dig deeper and they wanted to conclude something else. What's the purpose of it? They landed on this, that form follows function. Any old anyone who can count and rhyme can write a sonnet, but to understand sonnets and to write them for a reason is something completely different. What is unique about this or that form? And does it offer something? Does it add anything if you use it for this or that topic? When it comes to villanelles, that whole tercet and quatrain thing, It makes it seem much harder than it actually is. What we want to do is we want to see through the rules and discover the main hallmarks of the form to give us some clue as to why you would use that over another form, to show us the why, the function. With Villanelles, the hallmark is those repeated lines. Entire lines recur. And you can have those thoughts come back in slightly altered contexts, like life lessons that you keep running into. Imagine some quote or life lesson that you've taken wisdom from throughout your life. Time and time again, that idea pops up, that wisdom stays relevant. Times change, but the wisdom doesn't. This gives Villanelles a wise, even bittersweet quality. Sometimes, I might even say most of the time, it's kind of like as a person, you try to run from this piece of wisdom. And no matter what you go, no matter what you try to do, how you try to fight it, you just keep slamming into this wall of truth. You just can't escape it. And because of that dynamic, it's often a way for poets to reflect on life and the themes which reoccur. The final words of the poems, then tying up the loose ends, reconnecting us to the very beginning through repeat. Sometimes it's even defeatist in the sense that the poet can't escape this idea. At other times, it's about stressing how universal a truth is. That dynamic really appealed to new poets around the turn of the century, particularly in the world wars. The world was changing, the world was gray, the old ways were falling. This new age was dawning, and it seemed to be sparked by the toppling of a previously dependable set of empires and social structures. And this new age that was following it was this towering graphite storm cloud. So I'm going to do a couple of episodes on this so that we can open wide the door to this kind of intimidating form, the villanelle. But the villanelle also offers a lot of potential for impact. So I'll start with the most classic. Welsh poet Dylan Thomas's Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. It's a pretty well-known poem that was even featured in 2014's hit movie Interstellar. It uses this reflective, repeated thematic journey idea. Dylan Thomas's poem, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, is all about when we go to die, we should fight death with everything we have. Have a listen to Dylan Thomas read it, and if you can, keep an ear out for how some of these lines repeat to feel how this whole villanelle thing works. Have a listen.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
So, there's those repeated lines occurring in different contexts. Whether it's good men or wild men or grave men or my father, the same advice pops up. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. and do not go gentle into that good night. In terms of rhyme, maybe you noted that there are two main sounds, two groups of end rhymes, a and ite. Good night, dying of the light, dark is right, sun in flight, and so on. And then close of day, had forked no lightning they, and a green bay, and so on. But as Thomas started under Milk Wood, let's begin at the beginning. The first three lines act like an overture, introducing us to the theme and recurring lines and rhymes of the poem. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Essentially, Thomas is saying, when you come to die, don't just wither away. Go out fighting. That's the grand lesson. It also establishes at least one rhyme, night and light. And those rhymes help us to remember the two lines that we're going to hear again and again throughout the rest of the villanelle. Do not go gentle into that good night, and rage, rage against the dying of the light. So resist death with everything you've got. It's been suggested that Dylan Thomas wrote this about his own father, but that's not exactly clear. Yes, I know he later says, and you, my father, but, poems don't become great poems because they're produced by great hands. I want you to know that. That's kind of a premise of this podcast. We don't keep reading this poem by Dylan Thomas because of Dylan Thomas and his father, right? I mean, maybe some of you have never even heard of the guy, Dylan Thomas. Once it gets put on paper, once the poem gets published, it becomes like a script. It causes us as readers to say, and you, my father, in our own heads, or even aloud. And when that happens, it's not about Mr. Thomas Sr., it's about all fathers who have children who remember them. It's someone's father, anyone's own father. But it was probably, in any case, still about someone that Dylan Thomas knew. It could be taking on a persona of someone, with Thomas thinking about, what is it like for that guy to watch his father pass away? Because then comes this next line. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, Because their words had forked no lightning is a beautiful but odd thing to say. To fork lightning is purely poetic as a verb. Lightning is forked, but who forks it? Lightning that splits and splits like a tree, okay, that's forked lightning, like a fork in the road, a split. But he says words had forked no lightning. So it's words causing a split, words fork. And then they fork lightning, this symbol of immense electric energy. So it seems to suggest something like their words didn't have big impact on future generations. The way lightning, when it forks, multiplies and heads in several directions. But that, too, is odd. The impact of their words would be something more like thunder, right? The effect of lightning is thunder, the rumble. So that's still an odd thing to say. And besides, some men or people do have thunderous, impactful words. So this seems to suggest that this was about some particular person or group of people, those people being themselves also lightning. And hovering in the background of that line is still this element of family heritage, a family tree of lightning, of impactful people whose impact themselves would be thunder once this line strikes Earth. But anyway, let's just keep going and take Thomas at face value. Old men who, on their deathbed, though they know that they're about to die, despite and even because their words had forked no lightning, they, what? Do not go gentle into that good night. There's that line from the first stanza, now in a different context. And this is what the villanelle is able to achieve. Because there is this repetition of whole lines, it offers the poet the ability to put hard hitting wisdom in new frames, new contexts. And this rolling rhyme scheme and repetition gives the entire poem a kind of cohesion. It ties the whole thing together. He goes on to place the other line in a stanza about men who believe that their life might have been different in retrospect, about old men with regrets. Quote, good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Now, this offers a new message on the theme. Instead of saying that old men who feel like their lives were useless and then suddenly feel this urge to make something of their deaths, this idea is a subtle variation. Thomas's idea about good men who cry about how their deeds might have been more heroic or noble in a different setting. I'm thinking of Men of Achieving now. Thomas says, come on, boys, rage, rage against the dying of the light, meaning it's not too late. Come on, it's not over till the fat lady sings. The poem goes on until we get to the classic 4-line end called a quatrain, qua meaning four. That's when we get to the line, and you, my father. And we might be tempted to think he's talking about his own father, but again, that doesn't make comfortable sense. He goes on, and you, my father, there on the sad height. The sad height being some kind of higher position, uh, probably heaven, but maybe perhaps on that trolley that holds caskets. Maybe just a kind of throne of about to die or on the precipice. But it would be weird to say something like this about your dad if they are not dead or even dying yet, which, when Thomas wrote this in 1947, was the case for him and his father. His dad didn't die for another 6 years. So perhaps instead, Thomas was merely confronted with the aging nature of his father, then wanting Thomas Sr. to not waste and wither away, but to die lively. But that's if it's biographical, which I'm not sure it is. In any case, the addition of and you is an interesting turn, as it's not just about old men in general, but applying that idea to one's own father, some particular person. In poetry, usually you, classically at least, refers to a lover. You, my father, then communicates some kind of love, not romantic love, but a father son love. So there's a lot in just and you. And while we've been going from one kind of man to another, this and you recast the entire message as coming from a son to his father. With these 4 words, and you, my father, the entire poem about old men not dying easy takes on a very new character. Now, it's also about the desire for sons to see their fathers fight death. It's about the desires of children of fathers rather than just some blanket instruction for elderly men. I have found myself thinking this with elderly family members, even some I have lost. I wanted them in that time to fight death, tooth and nail. I thought, come on, don't you dare give up. And instead of just being preachy here, just telling old men how to die, Thomas's addition of and you, this personal address, you, adds an extra layer. The new narrative that results after and you is a son to a father. Now, it's not just philosophical or preachy. It's not just about death. It's about the feeling that people feel at dying loved ones. Now, it's relatable. It's relatable to me, I think, as a son of a father and as a younger man who has also watched his elderly family members come to their final end, some of them with a bang and others with a whimper. So, and you, my father, There on that sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. I really like the use of fierce in fierce tears. In these two lines, the drama is at its height. The gurgling of rage at inevitable death, fighting through tears. And curse and bless me, there's both a burden and an inspiration. Curse, bless me now, I pray. So much emotion, so much fighting, and we know what's around the corner. We know that death is near. But Thomas has two more lines left. So what comes next? Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Ah, there they are again. It ends with dying of the light, but it does not end with death. It ends with two lines of wisdom. And strictly speaking, actually, it ends with light. And that is what makes this so powerful. And that's the cool thing about this form, the villanelle. The exposition of new meanings from the same exact lines and the rhymes help as well to tie all of that together. From this form, we get a sense of order to our life. We see recurrent lessons, inescapable truths, taking up arms against the other inescapable truths like death. Now, that dynamic involves order. That dynamic where life has some story, some recurrent lessons, that necessitates some kind of organization. And so writing this not in free verse, but in a form makes sense. It's only natural. I think it would be much less impactful without a structure. A poem about recurrent wisdom, which depicts life as having some theme, some organization. Yeah, it's best to write that in a form that involves repeats and recurring lines. The form follows function. And all rules aside, that's what makes this villanelle work. So have a listen to Dylan Thomas read it again.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
I have to confess that I haven't written many villanelles myself. I've wanted to, but I came across the description of the form in the middle of this big poetry project I'm working on. Hopefully, I'll get to share that at some point. And I even realized that some of my favorite poems are villanelles without even knowing it. Besides one of the Hopkins episodes, my favorite poem, My Own Heart, my number 2 favorite poem is One Art by Elizabeth Bishop. Now, Elizabeth Bishop's stuff isn't public domain, so I can't treat it here, not quite yet at least, but I urge you to go check it out. One Art by Elizabeth Bishop. But what I find intimidating about the villanelle is, well, first of all, the strict rules and remembering those rules. But both you and I can go and just Google that for a reference. But there's also, two, the need to have not only hard hitting lines, but to have those lines be applicable in different situations. Those recurring lines need to be such sucker punch lines and versatile enough to sucker punch in a variety of contexts. So, loosely speaking, if you want to try it, think about some life lessons that you remember. What words forked lightning for you? What are some ideas or quotes that you return to time after time? Try to make those repeating lines. Better if you can make them rhyme. Then throw those lines into different contexts. Remember, in a tercet, you get 2 lines to set up that new context and then land it with your quote. So I hope I've given you a good first look at Villanelles with this great Welsh poet, Dylan Thomas. He also wrote a poetry piece that is both poetic and theatrical about a whole day in a very tiny village called Under Milk Wood. He's inspired a lot of poets after him, and I'm really glad he did. It makes the poem more interesting to me that it has a form and that the waves of recurring lines serve to fight being forgotten. I'm really appreciative of these poets at that time who, being pressured to abandon form altogether and give up the fight, said, "We will not go gently into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light." Hey, y'all. Preston here. My favorite line of today's poem was, "Whose words had forked no lightning." Tell me yours or ask me stuff on Preston's Poetry Podcast Instagram or Facebook pages or at prestonspoetrypodcast.com. We'll see y'all.